What's good, YouTube? Brian here, back again with another video. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're not going to do a full rod review or anything like that, but today we're going to talk about my top 5 high-end rod combos that I used last year. Now, making this video is a little tough because I have so many rods and I caught fish on a bunch of them, but a little about me, since you guys might not know, I do fish in a tournament bass league. It's a Wednesday nighter thing. It goes all year, so a lot of my fishing comes in kind of two ballparks. One, fishing for my tournaments, which means practicing on a lot of the lakes that are in the rotation. So a lot of tournament practice, and then tournaments, obviously, which are just fun tournaments. I'm not in like Bass Nation or anything like that. It's just a local bass tour called Greenhorn. Anyway, so I'm either practicing for tournaments and fishing in tournaments, or I'm fun fishing. And most of my fun fishing is done in Northwest Wisconsin because me and my wife, we have a camper over there, and so a lot of my like fun fishing on the weekends when I'm not practicing for tournaments is over in Wisconsin lately, mostly fishing for smallmouth and some largemouth, but mostly smallmouth. So fish for largemouth during the week, for tournaments, smallmouth on the weekends for fun. So I do a little bit of both. But when I was going through my collection, this video is, I was looking at what were the top 5 rod combos that caught me the most number of fish this last season in 2020. It's not which are my favorites, because I have a lot of rods that are favorites that I could have included in this list, but these are the 5 rods that by number of fish I caught throughout 2020. So this is just a numbers thing. And I think some of the rods in this lineup might be surprising to you guys, because I know I'm kind of known as like a Megabass fanboy, and a lot of my stuff is Megabass content. But believe it or not, there's only one Megabass rod in my top 5. So let's dive in right away. So first off, the #1 rod that I caught the most fish on, bar none, last season was this. The Conquest 842S. This is my favorite spinning rod I own. It fits my hand great. It's insanely sensitive. It's really versatile. I mostly use this rod for Ned rigs, wacky Senkos around docks, and shallow fishing wacky Senkos. I also use this rod with swim baits. As you can tell, I have a Josh Douglas GoldenEye swim head still tied on from last year, from last fall. This is also a decent shaky head rod. I mean, this is just the most versatile, does everything 7-foot medium spinning rod I have. Right now I'm running it with the Vanford 2500. I got this at the end of last season, but most of the season I was running a Tatula LT 3000 on this rod. So this rod is basically on my deck at all times, all year. I always have a Ned rig or something finessey tied onto this thing. And this #1 caught the most fish all season. I won a tournament using this rod, if you look back at my history, using the Ned rig. And just my #1 rod. I love this thing. If I can only pick one rod to use every single day for my entire collection, this would be it. So shout out to the Conquest as my #1 all-star rod. #2. The NRX 872S. This is a new rod that I got this year. It found its way onto my deck a lot because I use this rod for 2 things primarily this past season. #1, throwing swim baits. I know I have the other rod rigged up as a swim bait rod, but this is the one I use for the most of the season. So throwing a 1/8 to 1/4 ounce ball head jig or GoldenEye swim bait head with Kitex. I mostly throw Kitex, ExoSwim paddle tails, or the Spark Shads. So Spark Shads were probably my most common bait to throw on this with a ball head jig, but I also love to mix it up with the ExoSwims and the Kitex. Anyways, the point is, this is a really, really amazing deep water swim bait rod. So if you throw a lot of finessey, smaller swim baits and you like to fish water that is like 10 feet to 30 feet, this thing is sick. I also really liked using this rod for Nico rigs. So Nico rigging worms, this rod is fantastic at that because you can make real long casts because it's the 7.3. You can get that bait really out there, get it down deep, and you can feel every little piece of grass that your Nico rig comes through. You can feel when it's getting, hitting a piece of wood. You can feel when panfish are nibbling at your Nico rig with this thing. I mean, you'll be in like 15, 20 feet of water, and your worm will be down there, and it'll be getting pecked at by bluegills, and you'll feel every little peck that the bluegills are making on this thing. It is so sensitive. So I like fishing offshore, so this 7.3 length is perfect for that. So I caught a lot of smallmouth with this rod using swim baits. I caught a lot of largemouth with this rod using Nico rigs. So the 7.3 872S NRX was probably my number 2 most used spinning rod. Now, the next 3 are going to be casting. I think I caught the most fish casting with the casting rod with the NRX 873C. So this is the 873 Carolina rig rod. This is the bottom dragging rod in the NRX lineup. However, this rod is versatile. I use this thing for Texas rigs. I flipped a lot of shallow milfoil, a lot of shallow grass with this rod. I also use this rod for dragging football jigs. Especially, I started getting into like the finessey JDM style football head jigs, like the tungsten and the smaller football head jigs with like a crotch trailer. I caught a ton of smallmouth with this rod. I caught a ton of largemouth with this rod. So largemouth fishing, I would throw a Texas rig on it. Smallmouth, I would throw a football head jig on this thing. So I have this paired up all year with the Metanium. This is the 7-speed, the previous generation Metanium, not the new one. I like the reel. I will say it's very smooth. Is it the best casting reel? Not really. But, you know, when you slap on a half-ounce football head jig, it casts it fine. But it's not like a long-distance caster, but it is super light. It balances really well with the 873. Well, I guess the balance is okay. I mean, all NRX casting rods are a little tip heavy, and this Metanium is a stupid light reel. It's all magnesium. So sure enough, this, yeah, I would say it's not, it doesn't balance great. It's tip heavy, but the whole package is so stupid light. Being tip heavy doesn't really matter, to be honest, on these NRXs when you throw a really, really lightweight rod, because the whole thing is like still feather light. So anyway, I caught probably the most amount of largemouth with a casting rod with this sucker all season. I know I got the X-Bites, and the X-Bites was almost something I was going to include in this list, but I didn't get the X-Bites until like mid-season, and that's where that rod really started to show up on the deck. But when you count the entire summer fishing 2020, this rod was probably my most active, my active stick. So really, really like the 873 football jigs, Texas rigs. Now, in Minnesota, we got a dock fish. You have to skip docks. Minnesota bass love docks, and the Legend X 7'1" medium heavy Legend X is still my favorite dock fishing jig rod. Now I have a 3/8 ounce Bass Tech jig on here right now with a little crotch trailer, and this is exactly what I was skipping docks with all season, or even fishing like laydowns, fishing grass. This is my 3/8 ounce jig rod. I always basically have a 3/8 ounce tied onto this rod all season. Anytime I need a 3/8 jig, I just dug this rod out of the box. So I say that I caught, most of the fish I caught on a traditional jig were caught on this 7'1" medium heavy Legend X. Now I have this paired up with a Aldebaran, so another super lightweight reel on a super lightweight rod. Let's check the balance on that one. Pretty good, right about at the lock nut. Yeah, little pass, a little right on the lock nut. So balance is really good in this thing with a lightweight reel. The reason I like this rod so much is because it's got a super soft tip. It makes skipping jigs actually really easy. So you got that tip that kind of loads up. You can go up under docks. Also, this rod is really sensitive. It has the Torzite guides. This rod is really, really sensitive. I'd say it's one of the most sensitive rods I have. When you're fishing shallow with a jig, you can feel every little thing. You can feel all the bites. You can feel when panfish are nibbling at it. You can feel, like, if you get under a dock, you can feel when it hits a chain. You can feel when you hit like a tire or something under someone's dock. I'm just saying it's a really, really, really sensitive rod. It's very light. It's easy to fish all day. The soft tip makes skipping really, really fun on this rod. So I would say that I like fishing a 3/8 ounce jig, especially up shallow. And if I'm doing that all day, this is the rod that's on the deck, and this is what I'm using. So here's my jig all-star. Now, the Megabass rod. Now, people might not have predicted this, but the Faust. This year, I really rekindled my love for frogging. I kind of got away from frogging the season or two before because I frogged a lot and we're just not getting bites, not getting action. I couldn't get the frog bite going consistently. But this year, man, for some reason, I was able to get the frog bite going pretty much all summer. This is a Reaction Innovations OG Swamp Donkey on here right now. you know, I have this rod paired up with a Tatula 108 speed reel with 50-pound. I think this is Stufix 832 or 530, whatever. The 8-strand Stufix braid on here. This rod caught a lot of fish. I frogged a lot, especially in tournaments when I didn't know what to do or I ran out of ideas. I just slapped the frog on and went and hit the slop and would, you know, grind out a bite or two. So this Faust was in my hands a lot this summer for largemouth fishing. So I got to give a shout out to the Faust. I didn't throw really. I flipped with this thing every once in a while. Every once in a while, we would go and flip heavy cover, and because this thing is an 8 power, has a lot of power to flip like a 1 ounce weight into heavy cover. So every once in a while, I did cut the frog off and throw a flipping setup on this rod, and it performed beautifully. But as a frog rod, this thing really saved my butt in a couple tournaments to fill out a limit. But I just liked having this rod all year. Is it the best rod? You can check my Faust review. I don't know if it's the best frog rod on the planet, but just pure numbers of how many fish I caught frogging this year was all done on the Faust, and frogging became a go-to technique all summer, and rekindled my love for frogging. I used to frog all the time. I got away from it for a little bit, and it's back. So next year, I am really excited to continue my frogging mission and to really get better at it. So anyway, those are my top 5 rod combos that I used this season. Some honorable mentions would have been the Landsat, would have been the Megabass Destroyer Automat. I use that rod a lot, caught a lot of great fish. It almost made the list. I was between this and the Automat, and I think I caught the most key fish and the most important fish and probably the most amount of fish on topwater with the frog versus like a popper or a walking bait. So that's why the Faust beat out the Automat in my top 5. But the Automat would be number 6. So that's it. That's all I got for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to be coming out with some more reviews real soon. So stay tuned, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next